Chosen one, the timing of this message is not random. It's a sign that the shift has already begun. You didn't react, and that silence spoke louder than any scream. Something unseen has been arranging itself around you, nudging you here the way a compass needle snaps to true north when the magnet is close. Your soul moved first, your mind is only now catching up. This is not entertainment, it's an unveiling. They pushed, you paused, and heaven recorded the verdict in that pause. What if I told you the quiet you kept was the hammer that shattered their hold? That the moment you stopped explaining was the moment the structure around you began to groan and split? If this message already speaks to your soul, subscribe, like this video, and comment 77 below. Stay, because tonight we are tearing the veil off a truth they never wanted you to see. That your withdrawal was judgment in motion, and the echo of that choice is still shaking rooms you no longer walk into. The discomfort your silence created. When you closed your mouth, their mask began to itch. They had grown fat on your need to clarify, to soothe, to prove you meant no harm. But the day you went still, their control panel lit up with alarms they could not mute. Ecclesiastes 3 verse 7 murmurs that there is a time to be silent and a time to speak. And you found that hinge without announcing it. Suddenly their tactics had nothing to grip, no defense to twist, no apology to devour, no emotional spark to fan into chaos. Your silence was a mirror they couldn't bear to face, because in it their motives stood naked. Remember the teacher who kept needling you until you stopped reacting, then accused you of arrogance. The partner who baited you with half-truths until you met them with calm eyes. The friend who thrived on gossip until your still gaze made the room feel crowded with truth. Comment silence if you felt the atmosphere turn thick the moment you chose quiet over combat. Hold that memory, because it is the bridge to the next reveal. Why your absence, not your arguments, was the tremor that shook their foundation. A hush from last night's dream still clings to you. A hallway lined with mirrors, yet only one reflection looks back, and its mouth is closed, eyes blazing. You woke with that image stamped behind your eyelids, a quiet command pulsing beneath your ribs. Something in you finally agreed to stop feeding the beast of explanation, and in that instant a lock turned. You didn't hear the click with your ears. You felt it in the way your shoulders dropped, in the way the room settled around you like a held breath released. What you always sensed, that your stillness was not emptiness but signal, is now stepping forward, hand outstretched, saying, "See? Remember the weight of being too much for people who were too little for the truth." You sat in circles where every word you spoke was cross-examined. So you learned to edit yourself mid-sentence, to soften edges, to carry everyone's comfort like unpaid rent. You stayed late explaining motives to someone who had already decided you were a threat. You apologized for a tone they invented. You rehearsed kindness so often you forgot what your own voice sounded like when it wasn't filtered through their fear. That ache in your throat after each forced smile, that buzzing in your skull after each argument you never wanted. Those were your alarms. Not all isolation is abandonment. Sometimes it is a sanctuary granted before you know you need it. Now hear this. None of it was random static. There was an architecture behind every misunderstanding, a scaffolding holding up their need to keep you pliable. Ecclesiastes 3 verse 7 whispered for years about a time to be silent, but you thought silence meant erasure. Didn't. It meant strategy. Think of Daniel, who shut lions' mouths not by shouting, but by trusting what couldn't be seen. Think of Jesus before Pilate, offering no defense because truth didn't need the court's approval. Your restraint was not weakness. It was witness. You were moving chess pieces while they were still slamming checkers. Then the subtle signs began to rise like mist off a lake. Déjà vu in conversations where you felt you had already chosen silence once before. A sudden chill when someone courted chaos near you. Dreams that replayed the same argument you decided not to have, but this time you walked away and the scene dissolved like smoke. Your palms tingled around certain names. Your stomach tightened at the thought of just one more talk. Your ears rang when a lie floated into the room. These were not quirks. They were codes. The universe blinking Morse with streetlights. Heaven tapping rhythms on your skin. Stop feeding what drains you. The confirmation didn't explode. It settled, like dust finally landing after a long shake. You noticed peace arrive in pockets, on the commute after you ignored the baiting text, in the quiet kitchen where you made tea instead of drafting another long message, in the steady heartbeat when you heard your name twisted and chose to let the echo fade. Your intuition had been accurate all along. You were only now giving it the authority it deserved. Safety began to feel like listening to yourself, not like making everyone else comfortable. Groundedness came, not with a roar, but with a room that finally felt big enough to stretch in. Deeper still, a memory older than your years stirred. This was not you becoming someone new. This was you remembering the one who signed up for this. An archetypal self under the rubble of people-pleasing rose, brushed off silence like ash, and whispered, "You knew how to do this before they taught you to beg." It felt like opening a cedar chest and finding a robe that fits. Jeremiah 1 verse 5, known before formed, took on weight. Your identity wasn't hiding. It was waiting for you to stop performing so it could breathe. And then came the first activation, soft but sure, like a pilot light catching flame. Sensitivity turned into sonar. You now read rooms without drowning in them. Your hunger for meaning stopped shaming you and started guiding your choices. You let your yes be rare and your no be sacred. You began to curate silence as a tool, not an absence. The muscles you built holding back rage are now the strength you use to hold steady truth. You stopped asking, "Will they understand?" and started asking, "Does this honor what I carry?" That shift was a step, a deliberate one, across a threshold you didn't even know was there until your foot touched it. So take this in with a gentle lung. You didn't stumble onto this message. It landed on you by design. The silence you chose was the sentence that set you free. Comment silence if the air around you thickened the moment you stopped explaining, and share the scene, the classroom glare, the kitchen argument that never happened, the phone call you let ring. That proved your quiet was power. Hold steady, because the next current pulls even deeper. We are about to trace how your very absence, the space you left behind, became the tremor that cracked their foundation and started the slow, holy collapse they swore would never come. To every heart already inside the circle, thank you for holding the line. And if you feel called to go even deeper, there's a sacred space reserved for our community. A private room where you receive full prophetic messages daily. Join our private membership through the link in the description and walk this path with us. Why they couldn't handle your absence. Your presence was the glue, the silent stabilizer in a house that looked stable only because you kept patching cracks no one acknowledged. The day you walked out, maybe not with a slam, maybe just with a quiet click, gravity changed. Isaiah 30 verse 15 says, "In quietness and trust is your strength." And you didn't know your strength was the column holding up their theater. They laughed when you left, but it was a hollow laugh, the kind that bounces around empty halls after the audience has gone. Suddenly their stories had holes, their alliances thinned. The energy they siphoned from your constant explaining dried up. They couldn't handle your absence because your energy had been the currency, and heaven froze their account the moment you stopped paying inattention. Comment absence if you have watched a room fall apart when you finally chose yourself. Keep leaning in because the collapse you sensed on the surface was only the first crack. Behind closed doors, entire kingdoms were trembling. Have you noticed the way a room can feel heavier after you arrive? As if the walls themselves tense up and wait for you to speak so they can twist your words? That wait didn't start when you learned your name. It was there in small ways long before you claimed your calling. A missed invitation that made no sense. A project blocked by technical issues that never appeared on anyone else's screen. A sudden coldness in eyes that were warm yesterday. Each was a breadcrumb from a hand you couldn't see. Something was leaning against you, adjusting the odds, breathing a chill across your victories. You felt it as a hum under the noise, a pressure that never announced itself but never truly left. Think back to the nights you lay awake replaying every sentence you said. The afternoons when you wondered why your joy irritated people who said they loved you. The way your heart sank when your excitement met their smirk. It wasn't just what they did. It was how it made you feel. Too bright, too sensitive, too intense, as if your natural volume hurt their ears. Shame crept in like fog under a door, soft but soaking everything. You doubted your instincts, stuffed your laughter down, reheated explanations until even you were sick of the taste. Isolation wasn't a choice. It became a symptom. You belonged nowhere because you were meant to rebuild the somewhere that didn't exist yet. Then the camera pans out and you see the scaffolding. This wasn't chaos. It was a system, a web spun to keep you pliable. People, powers, patterns, call them what you will, reacted to your potential the way Herod reacted to rumors of a child king, or how Israel's oppressors tightened their fists when Moses started asking questions. Exile, wilderness, furnace. Ancient stories dressed in your modern clothes. Isaiah 30 verse 15 whispered that quietness held strength, and you didn't know your calm was a threat until they clawed at it. You were walking a holy trial without a map, and every pushback was proof you were on holy ground. Now let your eyes adjust to the dark and notice what hides there. How many times did the pen run out of ink only when you were about to sign for yourself? How often did bad timing sabotage only the plans that would have freed you? Betrayals arrived like copy-paste errors. Different faces, same wound. Draining rooms felt normal because you thought endurance was virtue. Turn on the light, see the pattern, not to blame but to understand. Those weird glitches, those sudden walls, those copycat crises were the fingerprints of resistance. Unsettling, yes. Clarifying, absolutely. Feel the air thicken in memory. Conversations that felt like walking through syrup. Meetings where your thoughts blurred at the threshold. Nights where sleep broke into shards right before a big decision. That's interference, not coincidence. Not everyone casting a shadow knows they cast it, but shadows still fall. Picture silent watchers perched on rafters, doors that close an inch at a time, fog that settles just heavy enough to make you forget your own outline. Your light pulled distortion the way a lighthouse draws moths and storms alike. This is the moment the invisible becomes visible. You were not imagining the pressure. You were refining under it. And how did you cope? Maybe you became a contortionist, bending until fragments of you lived in everyone else's pockets. Maybe you rebelled in whispers, nodding on the outside while your spirit packed its bags inside. Perhaps you shut down, went small, wore neutrality like armor, convinced that invisibility was safer than being misread again. None of that makes you weak. It makes you a survivor of a war you weren't told you were fighting. Fear of standing out grew roots. The urge to shrink wrapped itself around your ribs. The temptation to quit sang lullabies. This paragraph is a mirror, not a verdict. See yourself, forgive yourself. Then comes the pivot, the slow turn of a massive wheel. What opposed you was proof, not punishment. Resistance confirmed rank. Every blockade was a flare in the night saying, valuable cargo aboard. So take back what leaked, your pace, your focus, your holy no. Let your voice return like a tide, not a tantrum. Let your spine remember steel. This is reclamation with teeth and tenderness. I place the scepter back in your palm, the key back on your chain, the scroll back in your satchel. You were never empty, you were embargoed. Embargo lifted. Here is the soft blade of truth. They couldn't handle your absence because your presence was power. You were opposed because you are catalytic. The harder they pressed, the clearer your outline became. Let that settle like oil on your forehead. Comment absence if you've watched a structure sag the second you stepped out, and share one moment. A text you didn't send, a door you didn't reopen, a sigh you finally released, that showed you the balance had shifted. Hold tight, because the next unveiling peels back what happened after you left. The whispers, the cracks behind curtains, the quiet thunder of a kingdom collapsing where you no longer stand. And to every soul who's supported with a super thanks, thank you. You are keeping this light alive for others who haven't found it yet. If you feel called to help this mission reach more chosen ones, tap the super thanks button below. Your energy supports these messages and helps them travel further. Your voice matters, your belief matters, and your light is felt here. The hidden collapse behind closed doors. Judgment rarely arrives with thunder in the sky. More often it sounds like a door easing shut and a lock turning soft. While you healed in silence, they paced in rooms that felt suddenly crowded with consequences. Psalm 39 verse 1 speaks of guarding the tongue, and in your guarded silence a sentence was passed. Phone calls grew tense, alliances frayed over whispers, plans unraveled because the common denominator, your energy, was gone. You were not there to absorb the blow, and the blow landed where it originated. Think of Amos 5 verse 13. Therefore the prudent keep silent in such a time, for it is an evil time. Your prudence triggered their exposure. Comment door if you sense something heavy closing the moment you chose not to answer, and share one sign. A confession that surfaced, a rumor that died, a glare that revealed itself, that told you the collapse had begun. Breathe in, because the silence you kept was more than strategy. It was scripture in motion, and your exit was a scroll unrolling. It started like a click behind your ribs, a memory snapping into focus the way a dim hallway brightens when one hidden lamp flares to life. Suddenly, that offhand comment from years ago makes sense. The canceled meeting feels scripted. The timing of your quiet departure reads like choreography instead of coincidence. What once felt like scattered static begins to arrange itself into a constellation, and you realize the night sky was spelling your name the whole time. You just hadn't learned to read in stars yet. Then the wallpaper of your days starts talking. Numbers repeat with unnerving precision. Phrases chase you from book to billboard to passing stranger. A sentence you wrote months ago reappears in someone else's mouth like an echo with new edges. Reality is no longer flat. It is embossed with codes, spirals that lead inward, angles that meet at truth, equations that balance only when you subtract what drains and carry the one called purpose. Scrolls unroll in silence. Geometry hums under your skin, and the math of heaven proves your life has never been random. Inside, everything sharpens. Intuition stops whispering and begins to ring like crystal. Boundaries form not from bitterness but from clarity. Your body leans away before the mind catches up. Your chest warms when alignment enters. Your breath shortens when manipulation prowls near. Energy shifts are no longer dismissed as moods. They are instruments tuning to a higher pitch. This isn't theory you write in journals. It is confirmation pulsing in muscle and marrow. You are reading the room correctly, and the room knows it. Outside, the world rearranges to mirror your interior renovation. People move, some out, some in, some to a distance that finally fits the truth between you. Doors you begged to open stay shut with a loving finality. Windows you never noticed swing wide on silent hinges. Resistance appears with new teeth, but so do opportunities that answer questions you only asked in prayer. The architecture of your timeline reveals scaffolding you didn't see while it was wrapped in tarps. What is within begins to be echoed without, like a drumbeat answered by the mountains. A tenderness rises that feels older than your body, like a song you knew before lyrics existed. Dreams you tucked away as just dreams start speaking in full sentences. Scriptures you skimmed crack open. Job 34 verse 29 murmurs, "When he gives quietness, who then can make trouble?" And you nod because you lived that verse without knowing its address. Memory returns as recognition, not nostalgia. You aren't inventing a future. You're remembering an oath. The sacred intelligence buried under years of survival shakes itself awake and looks at you with familiar eyes. Forward is no longer a guess. It is a remembering in motion. You stop asking for permission slips from hands that tremble around your light. Revelation becomes roadmap. Each step taken in trust inks another line on the parchment under your feet. Prophecy turns inward, you speak it over yourself first. The call doesn't thunder from clouds. It rises from your gut like a tide you can't reverse. Destiny isn't a distant shore. It's the ground hardening as you plant your heel and move. So reclamation begins with a steady hand. The opposition was a signal flare, not a stop sign. You lift your voice, not to shout them down, but to call yourself back. The crown that slipped now sits true. The key you thought lost hangs warm against your chest. The scroll you feared burned is intact in your grip. Fierce doesn't mean frantic. It means focused, prophetic, precise. You own what was always yours because you finally see that no one else can steward it. Revelation, you realize, is not a curtain call. It is an open gate. The truth waited until you could hold it without dropping yourself. Let this land like a seal and a summons. You were never late. You were being timed. Comment door if you felt something heavy close when you chose silence. And tell us the dream, the whisper, the confession that proved the collapse had begun. Share it so another wanderer can trace the cracks back to their own freedom. And breathe, because the next unveiling is already turning the handle. The moment where your exit is revealed as prophecy, and what fell behind you becomes the foundation for what you're about to build. the prophetic nature of your exit. You were not meant to stay as a token mercy or a convenient shield. You were sent as a test, and when the test was failed, your leaving became prophecy fulfilled. In 1 Samuel 2 verse 10 it says, "Those who oppose the Lord will be broken." And sometimes that breaking begins when a chosen one withdraws the grace of their constant presence. Your silence was a decree, your exit a trumpet no one heard but everyone felt. The moment you crossed that threshold, chains began to rattle off your ankles and tighten around the wrists that once reached for you with manipulation. Comment exit if you walked away and felt heaven walk with you, and tell us the line, the dream, the sudden peace that confirmed it. Do not look back, because what falls behind you must fall to fertilize the ground you will never till again. There it is, the split in the road you can no longer pretend isn't there. The inner voice holding up a mirror and asking, will you keep orbiting what already died, or will you step where the ground is new and unnamed? This isn't theory anymore. This is a threshold. One side is crowded with the habits that kept you polite and powerless. The other hums with a current you can feel but can't predict. Standing still has become its own kind of betrayal. The question isn't, do I know enough? It's, will I choose? Your exit was never about escape. It was about entrance, and tonight you decide which world you'll feed with your next breath. Count, without shame, what you gave away to keep storms calm. Hours soothing egos, whole days defending motives, years spent translating your heart for ears that only wanted leverage. That was not failure. It was training, weight added to the bar so your spirit would learn to lift. Now gather it back with ritual clarity. I call my time home. I call my voice home. I call my focus, my tenderness, my holy anger home. Thrones left empty get claimed by whatever force arrives first. Let it be you. Sit, straighten the crown they laughed at. This is reclamation spoken like law, not plea. Name your arsenal out loud. Insight that cuts through fog like a blade. Sensitivity that functions as radar. Memory that holds patterns the world forgets. Discernment as a lockpick, strength as a shield, silence as a decree. Those weren't weaknesses. They were signatures stamped by fire. Keys jangling at your hip, scrolls rolled tight in your chest, embers banked until the mission needed heat. Where the armor you forged in nights of doubt, wield the codes you learned in rooms that tried to unwrite you. Everything they mocked, you now mobilize. See the road as ink that appears under your feet the moment you move. The map was never missing. It was responsive. Action is your new clarity. You message the mentor. You launch the work. You leave the table that feeds on you. With each step, another lantern lights, revealing stairs you couldn't see from the doorway. This is less wandering and more remembering the mission file you tucked into your own soul. The camera pulls back. You, crossing a bridge that rises as you walk, while the old shore crumbles without your weight. Look wider and feel the pulse of others stepping in time. You were not built to be a lone torch in an endless field. Soul tribes are forming in the comments, in quiet coffee shops, in messages that start, I thought I was alone until... Divine clusters lock like puzzle pieces. Stop shrinking to fit a table that is already collapsing. Stand at full height so your frequency becomes a beacon. Your yes signals another's yes. Your courage licenses theirs. This is a rising order, not a private miracle. Treat your energy like sacred oil. Pour with intention. Guard the flame. Alignment now looks like choices, like boundaries that hum with love, like devotion lived in the small hours when no one claps. This is ceremony in sneakers, how you answer the call, how you rest, what you consume with your eyes and ears. You are entrusted with a current that changes rooms. Steward it. Let no be a holy word. Let yes be a covenant. Malachi 3 verse 16 spoke of a book of remembrance. Write in it with every act that honors what you carry. Hear me plain, you are ready. Not almost. Not once you take one more course. Every bruise, every night of shaking, every silence you held instead of shouting was a corridor to this sentence. You are ready to speak without shrinking, to move without second-guessing, to love without leaking. This is the last inhale before the portal. Step. The chains that rattled loose around your ankles now clang shut around the wrists that tried to own you. The trumpet was your exit. The echo is their reckoning. Walk. Do not drag yesterday with you like a trophy of pain. Let it compost into the soil of what you will plant. So here is the seal and the summons. Your revelation was the invitation to embodiment. This is not a message. It is your mandate. Let this final line lodge like flint in your bones. What fell behind you was fertilizer for what you're about to grow. Comment exit if you felt heaven match your stride the moment you walked away. And share the dream, the word, the sudden peace that proved it. Your story steadies another traveler. And stay close because the widening comes next. The part where your single stand becomes a structure others can shelter in, and the fire you carry becomes a field blazing in the night. This was never about a wound to fix. It was about a seal to honor. The scar you carried in silence became your proof of assignment, the quiet gate through which purpose marched in full armor. They tried to shame it into silence, but you are here, breathing, decoding, expanding, and the mark that repeats through bloodlines and soul lines now sits in your hands with intention, not confusion. Let the law stand as stone. What heaven stamps, earth cannot smudge. Walk with that in your posture. Speak with that in your cadence. Build with that like a mason laying sacred brick. Your silence was a verdict, your exit a sentence, your next step a proclamation. You are not repairing an old house. You are raising a new city inside and around you. Brick by breath by blazing word. A vision slipped between sleep and morning. You stood in a ruined courtyard, ash swirling like slow snow, and in the center a single stone glowed with an imprint. Your imprint, hot and unwavering. You touched it and felt not pain but recognition. A warmth that crawled up your arm and rewrote the chill in your bones. In that instant you understood the difference between a wound and a seal. One begs to be hidden, the other insists on being honored. This was never triage. It was coronation hidden in plain sight. The scar you tried to bandage became a doorway, and everything noble that ever stalked your shadow strode through it wearing your name. Do you remember the first time you knew something sacred lived under your skin? Even if you couldn't argue it in a room full of proof-demanding faces? Maybe it was the way your heart stung at injustices others laughed off, or how silence felt like prayer even when you didn't know how to pray. Those weren't glitches. They were signatures. You spent seasons calling yourself broken for feeling too deeply, when in truth depth was the language of your assignment. Training doesn't always look like classrooms and mentors. Sometimes it looks like nights hunched over questions, tears baptizing the floor while heaven etched authority into your quiet yes. An inner whisper threads through your ribs now, steady as pulse. Call it what it is, not trauma to erase, but testimony to elevate. The mark that repeats through bloodlines and soul lines is not a curse looping history. It is a lineage reclaiming itself. Think of Ruth gleaning in foreign fields, the seal of loyalty burning brighter than loss. Think of Paul boasting in his weaknesses because power perfected itself there. You breathe and decode because something in you remembers the cipher. Every time you chose truth over performance, mortar mixed itself in the unseen, waiting for you to build with it. Picture a seal pressed into wax, pressure, heat, impression, and understand your life through that geometry. They tried to scrape it off with ridicule, sand it down with gossip, drown it in their noise, but the imprint only deepened. What heaven stamps, earth cannot smudge. It can only reveal or resist. So walk like a letter already validated. Speak like a contract already notarized. Lay brick with breath and blazing word. The way masons set stones by the rhythm of their own heartbeat, sure that each piece carries weight and meaning. You are not patching drywall in a crumbling house. You are raising arches in a cathedral that will outlast their disbelief. You were their final test, and when they failed, judgment moved not with noise, but with your stillness. Let that empower you, not harden you. You did not seek revenge, you revealed reality. Subscribe if you haven't yet. Like this video, and comment I am chosen to let this message anchor in your soul. Share it with someone who needs to hear this. For full prophetic revelations daily, join the membership via the link in the description. Your spiritual path deserves more than fragments. Step into the full light. And if this message moved you deeply, consider tapping the Super Thanks button to support the mission. Every Super Thanks fuels the light we're spreading together. Keep your silence sacred, your steps sure, and remember, they cannot outrun a verdict spoken in heaven and walked out on earth by you.